Welcome to the program. We're getting down to the pointy end of the carbon tax debate. Over the next 6 weeks, the final details will be hammered out between Labor, the Greens and the Independents. And the tension is certainly starting to show on all sides. This week, the government was frantically trying to play down suggestions the carbon price would be $40 a tonne. The Greens lashed out at the media, in particular the so-called Murdoch hate media, as Bob Brown calls it. While in the coalition, cracks were re-emerging over Tony Abbott's direct action alternative. To look at the state of play this week, we're joined by Labor MP Kelvin Thomson, former Liberal MP Bruce Baird, former West Australian Labor Premier Jeff Gallop and Liberal MP Jamie Briggs. Thank you all for joining us this week. I want to start on the carbon tax and in particular the comments Malcolm Turnbull, the former Liberal leader, has made about Tony Abbott's direct action plan. He was essentially suggesting that this plan is easier to dump if climate change doesn't turn out to be real. Were they helpful comments, Jamie?
Well, I think they highlight how desperate the Prime Minister and Labor have become on this issue. That this morning before 9:30am you'd had three of the most senior ministers, including the Prime Minister, out there trying to pump up the issue. And
but we'll get to the reaction to his comments, but what about the comments themselves?
Well, it's not the first time. Malcolm said similar things before. I mean, I don't think there was anything particularly new in what Malcolm had said.
I think that's right. We know he's not a fan of the policy. He thinks it's a dud.
Well, I don't think he said that. I think he said he articulated what was the detail of the policy. He quite clearly said that. He supports the policy. He obviously does. He's in the shadow cabinet.
Well, does he? Does he support the policy? I know Tony Abbott said he does, but you know, he talked about it costing billions of taxpayers' dollars, and went on to say if in fact climate change has proved to be not real, then a scheme like that can be brought to an end.
Well, he's in the shadow cabinet, so he supports the policy, and he will be in the cabinet if we win the election.
Is that how it works, Bruce Baird? If you're in the shadow cabinet, therefore you support the policy?
Well, you're tied by cabinet solidarity.
Do you really think Malcolm Turnbull supports this policy?
I mean, I agree with his position that we should have gone with the emissions trading scheme. It was actually the one John Howard took the election, and Kevin Rudd should have delivered and didn't, and now we've got the carbon tax, which Julia Gillard said we weren't going to have, and now we've got it.
We'll get to that, but we all know Malcolm Turnbull doesn't support this policy. It's no great secret.
But what he said was, you know, not remarkable. I mean, we know he supports the emission trading scheme. He says it's going to cost a lot of money, which we know that, and it'd also be easy to just stop if suddenly you had facts that it all was inappropriate or the rest of the world weren't following, you could close it down.
As one Liberal MP put it to me, what he was really trying to say is you can't unwind the carbon tax. Therefore, Tony Abbott can't go to the election saying he'll roll it back or unwind it, because it's an economy-wide tax that you can't undo. It's hard to argue with that, Jamie Briggs.
Well, our policy is we will unwind the carbon tax. That's Tony Abbott's position, and that's the party's position.
But you've got these big companies having to make investment decisions with a carbon tax. They're told what it's going to be in 5 years, and what you come in and completely take it away. And
they'd be delighted to say thanks very much. Yes, we agree with you. Let's take it off. It would be fairly easy. You know, roll it back. They'd all jump on board. So I don't think it's a problem to roll that back either.
You can roll the carbon tax back. I mean, I don't think there's you know, it's a tax. You can remove the tax. I mean, that's the that will be the proposition at the next election. I mean, you know, in all honesty, really, we should have had this debate before the last election, or we should have a debate before it's implemented. Because, in fairness, people should have had the opportunity to see what the real idea of the Prime Minister was.
We've got a hung parliament. We have a hung parliament, and as a result of that, the terms of the debate shifted, and I think the voters didn't give a decisive result. So I think it's not surprising that the carbon tax is back on the agenda, given the support the Greens gained in the last federal election.
Would it be impossible
and I think,
to wind it back?
Sorry?
Would it be impossible to wind it back to
Well, I mean, there are two issues there. One, there's your point about the expectations of business and how they build that into what they're doing. But the second one is it's called revenue. And once it's built in and you've got the forecast, then Tony Abbott is going to have to tell the people of Australia, well, what's he going to do when that revenue is not there? So I think, you know, I think he's posturing. It's all opposition type mentality. To go into the election saying they'll get rid of it, I don't think it's believable.
Is there anything, Kelvin Thomson, factually incorrect in what Malcolm Turnbull said? I mean, he is just stating that direct action, you can undo it if you had to.
I think he's making it blindingly obvious, David, that he thinks that the opposition's climate policy is a lemon and he doesn't want to be fitted up with it. I don't think there is any other reading you can take on these comments. There are people in the world who think that there needs to be action in relation to cutting greenhouse gas emissions. There are people in the world who don't think that there needs to be this kind of action. Malcolm Turnbull clearly believes that there needs to be action, and he's sending out that signal loud and clear.
Certainly 2/3 of the community are not agreeing with the carbon tax at the moment, that's clear. They might agree that something needs to be done, but they certainly aren't agreeing with the idea of a carbon tax.
But Bruce, there's no doubt, a big shift from that early days of the Rudd government, and they didn't get it through. Point one, the Greens, of course, didn't come in behind it. Point two, he didn't call an election and take on the opposition on the issue. And there's been a lot of change since then. But I don't think the government, and I'm talking politically here, it's got no choice but to go for the carbon tax, to lay its position on the table for the people of Australia.
If that's the case.
And I think when you get it through, it makes a lot of difference.
It's got to sell this reform, though, and you know that big reforms, economy-wide reforms, are often hard to sell. How do you think this government is going selling this?
Well, first of all, I'd say this, though. You can't sell the opposite. Not getting it through is not saleable at all. So I think that's point one. Secondly, well, I think that once it's in, and I'm assuming here that the Parliamentary Committee will do a pretty good job, and I get the feeling Bob Brown is going to compromise on this occasion. You get that feeling. I mean, he's looking like
last time,
he didn't last time, but this time I think he's serious about being at the heart of government.
But before
and
we
that's
get to
why
that,
I think he's got a legitimate complaint against the media.
Before we get to that point, though, and we'll have a look at his criticism of the media, the government's sales pitch so far over the last 6 months.
I mean, trying to push it uphill.
Do you think it's done a good job?
Well, I think the government generally, in terms of sales, hasn't done a good job. I mean, the country's travelling pretty well. We came through the GFC. We've had significant commitments in education and health, and people can argue on the margins of those things, but the commitment's been there. In education, in higher education, there's been a significant... And yet, you'd think the country's falling apart, so they haven't sold themselves very well at all.
Hard to argue with that, Kelvin Thomson.
I think in relation to carbon, David, there's a world of difference between the situation now where the detail of the scheme is being worked on and isn't known, and the legislation's not known, and the world once the scheme is put in place. And I'd take people back to the GST. When John Howard was putting in the GST, people like me and the opposition had a field day going after all the implementation problems, all the complexities, all the difficulties for small business, all the anomalies. But once it was in, the heat came back on us over the issue of rollback.
He also had an election. He also gave people a chance to go to the polls.
I'm talking about the lead up to the 2001 election, where we were in a very strong position at the start of 2001, and people expected that we would win the 2001 election. But once it was in, the pressure came back on us over rollback and the like. And when we said we will keep the GST, frankly, all those years of opposition and all those years of work went down the drain. And I think you will see a similar sort of situation unfold here, where there's a very different dynamic once the scheme is announced and once you have the parliamentary debate.
The problem, though, for this Prime Minister is, unlike the former Prime Minister, he actually did take it to an election, so he didn't shred his own credibility. The Labor Party was pushing it uphill, so to speak, because they had we'd won the election in 1998. The problem Julia Gillard's going to have is that she shredded her own credibility on this issue so badly in the community that they don't trust her.
It was also a different position in terms of the polling. I mean, when you compare that John Howard never went below in terms of the party, about 45% when the debate was going on about the GST. And we've got the current polls, which shows Labor is down, 32 in terms of primary vote. So in terms of the credibility, I think no matter what the government put up at the moment, there is just a whole credibility gap, popularity of the government, and then you're trying to sell an unpopular tax. It's very difficult.
Well, the Greens have a big buy-in on this as well, and as discussed, Bob Brown has been lashing out at the media, and that culminated with a rather testy exchange where he declared that, yes, this is his tactic now to take on the media, in particular what he calls the Murdoch hate media. I want to play some of what he had to say and have a look at the reaction from one journalist in particular.
You compare and contrast and take on politicians and other sections of the media, but you don't like it when we take you on. Don't be so tetchy. Some heat needs to go back onto those sections of the media which are trying to drag this process down. It's not balanced. It is opinionated. It's not news. Don't be so unhappy. Don't be so much on the back foot.
I'm not unhappy.
Oh,
you just come out here every day and you just bag out the Murdoch press or any media that you don't like, and you call them the hate press.
But the Murdoch press comes out every day and bags out the Greens. Why one rule for you and not one for the others? Come on, be happy about it.
You're suggesting, but even on the carbon tax issue, you're suggesting that don't you think we're just reflecting what a lot our audience or wants? And
well, if you are, be proud and stand by it. Don't be defensive.
Well, I'm not being defensive.
It sounds to me like you are.
Well, most polls would suggest that people don't want the carbon tax and that you are on the wrong foot on this issue.
Well, look, let me tell you.
And across the media, not just the Murdoch press.
The Greens vote's growing faster than the Murdoch media circulation. I'm happy. I'm just taking you on.
And